disagreements is something that I think we experience everywhere, right? It's a universal part of our just existence in terms of our engagement with people, whether it's at work, whether it's in our communities, whether it's in our families even. There's always going to be something that we will find a disagreement on. And I thought it would be a useful conversation to have because I think when we look at, especially with something like art, it's one of the areas where, because it's so subjective, it can be very easy to have disagreements about something as innocuous as art. But in some ways, it's quite informative there too. There's certainly been pieces that I've seen through my experience that I've gone, I just don't like this. But it sometimes felt weird to say, I don't like this, because it can be something that's personal, at least to the artist it would be. But even then, it's a useful exercise, to kind of, how do we practice having almost constructive disagreements? So, Meghan, I thought I'd ask from your perspective, and just let's start with art, right? When you've experienced art that you either don't like or you're not sure about, or you've had disagreements on, like how do you approach it? How do you think about it?
I would say my perspective is a little bit different since I'm an artist and I approach it from an artist's point of view. Okay, I look at a piece of artwork and I try to resist immediate judgment on a piece of artwork. I'm usually trying to investigate and understand what the intent and why the artist created or how they created something. And so I try to deny or withhold that human intent to judge immediately and try to understand first and approach it very more open-mindedly, I guess. And I have come into contact with people who judge immediately, and it's like, whoa, slow down, take a breath. Okay, let's take a couple steps back. Let's try to get you to understand the piece first, break it down, and then make a decision whether you like it or not. Because sometimes we just judge on appearance, and we've got that saying, don't judge a book by its cover, for a reason, because there might be more beneath the surface. And I know when I've had conversations or had people step back, when they start to understand the intent, or they start to look and understand the skill or their techniques, or how the paint or medium was applied to the canvas, they can actually understand the creation process, and it actually helps them to understand and maybe open up to understanding the artwork a bit more. And then they can say that they don't like it. But I mean, I approach it as, okay, we're not disagreeing, but can you understand the artwork? I think that's where I kind of don't look at disagreements about artwork. Yes, you can like it or not, but do you understand why it was made or how it was made? And can you appreciate that? And then move on to the disagreements.
Well, and I think that's really wonderful, because what I'm hearing from you is that it's not that you can't not like something, right? It's not saying you have to universally like something, and that even if you understand the intention behind something, that you still have to like it, right? Yeah. I can still understand the intent and just go, nah, it's still not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
But that doesn't take away from what I think is a very real emotion to begin with, which is sometimes we see something and there's almost like an instantaneous reaction, like almost a quick judgment of, oh, something doesn't feel right about this, or I don't really like something about this. But I think the point that you're making is that sometimes we can recognize that immediate emotion. However, if we pause for a moment and go a little bit deeper, we might be able to uncover a little bit more. And I think that that's a really interesting foundational component to or a disagreement.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at us as a society. We are trying to evolve away from those quick judgments, or at least there are some people that are trying to evolve away from those quick judgments, like, hey, this person's wearing those shoes, this person's wearing those pants or that dress, or
they have that opinion.
Or they have that opinion of something, and yet, we've gone on social media of like, whoa, why are you judging that person because XYZ? And I think we should also be having those conversations about art, because when you're exposed to a certain type of art, when you see it more often, you're more accepting of it. But it's like when you look at Picasso's work back in the day, it wasn't immediately accepted. Some of it was rejected immediately because it was new. Or Marcel Duchamp, people were like, what are they doing? And they just disgusted by what he was doing. And over time, the more and more people saw those images, the more they started to accept it. And it's that repetition and internal input into your mind of, what's acceptable. And when we have new things, we're in that position of automatically rejecting. I mean, I think you've touched on this, Scott, about new things. We reject it immediately because it's just new. And I think you've had some work experiences with this.
Well, yeah. And the way that I would frame it is, I think as we go through our daily lives, we have our heuristics, we have our habits, we have our expectations of how we think things are supposed to happen, right? And I've always found it's when something comes along that doesn't quite match that expectation, that's actually a trigger for judgment. And whether good or bad. Right? Like I like this message, I don't like this message, that type of a thing.
Yeah.
And so it can be a very, like I said, a very natural part of what happens. But to your point, it's when we experience, it's when we notice that, but then be able to pause and move beyond that to kind of go, well, let me reflect on why I didn't like something.
Yeah.
That's when I think the practice of acceptance starts to come from, right? I think one of the really wonderful things about art in some ways, and why I sometimes think of art as a good practice for this, is because if I'm just looking at a piece of artwork and there's no one else around and I don't like it, I can have that, embrace that opinion and no one's gonna like speak back to me in some ways. But that is sort of the practice, right? I've moved beyond, I think over time, I've moved beyond looking at a piece, dismissing it outright, to actually going, okay, something's not quite matching up in my expectation. Why don't I like something? And giving myself that extra bit of time to reflect on, okay, can I take a step back to say, is this because there's a particular element I don't like? Is it because I'm making a particular judgment? Is it because I don't understand the intent of perhaps the person creating that artwork? And those little practices are things that I have actually taken over into my experiences, again, with disagreements with work or with family or friends, where it helped me practice that pause and reflection.
Oh, see, I'm gonna jump from there because it reminds me of what you're saying is a post that I actually put on LinkedIn about thoughts on approaching artwork, and you're approaching it from the viewer's point of view and I'm kind of approaching it from the artist's point of view. And one of the things a piece of artwork is the artist's diary. That is a piece of them. That is their true self. That's what's inside and that they're sharing. You don't have to like it, but I don't have to like your diary either, what your events, what you're into, and that's fine. And sometimes an artist, well, not sometimes, but artists can get offended because you might say, hey, I don't like that, it's ugly, but you're also insulting them because the artwork is the diary, the artwork is them, especially the more abstract, the more emotional, the more vulnerable that in a state they were in to create that piece. So with a viewer, you might make a statement, but I would encourage to kind of step back first and make a statement. Not saying that you have to like anything, but try to understand that is somebody's livelihood. And if you do say something and the artist responds and they responds negatively, now you know why. They've responded negatively because you're insulting them, even though you say, oh, I'm not insulting you, it's just the artwork. Well, the artwork is them.
Well, I was going to say, let me yes and to that to say, well, because disagreements can go both ways.
Yeah.
Just as an audience a viewer of an artwork and say, I don't like this artwork, and there's something, it's separating that intent. Or so too from the creator's perspective, right? Because I can hear what you're saying there, which is, as an artist, you put all your emotions and energy in a piece of artwork, and then I guess there's a hope that people like the artwork, but then from the audience side, these are people who may not have that education, may not have that awareness, may not have that understanding of the craft, and that's where that opinion comes from. So equally, it's also, well, what's the intention of the audience, right? Yeah. What's their journey? What's their journal, rather? What's been going through their world and experiences that might contribute to that?
So you do a yes and to that, because what you're saying is like a person who connects with your artwork is somebody who's on that same wavelength, who's on that same, not necessarily has to be education, but some maybe even intuitively connected or can respond to it. They might not know why they relate to you, but they know they relate to you, which is why they like your artwork. So just like we have different personalities in the world, and it's not just one size fits all, it's the same with the artwork and the disagreements. And it's just with this video, we're just trying to encourage, it's okay to disagree and it's okay to not like it, but to be respectful and just try to be aware and understanding of the audience member and the artist.
Absolutely. So if there was one small practice or takeaway that we would like to encourage, given our particular medium is art, is the next time you see a piece of artwork that you don't like, cool, right? But go and look at it and just reflect on.
Take some time.
Take some time. Yeah. Why don't you like it? Have a look at the plaque, and hopefully there's some good information on the plaque to convey that intent. And if you still don't like it, that's okay. Where this becomes even more interesting is then roping in a colleague or a friend and saying, hey, what do you think about this? Do you like this?
Or maybe even ask them, like, what do you think the meaning is? Do you see something different than I see? And maybe that'll help with the awareness or understanding of what the artist is doing or creating.
Yeah, and it's a nice small sandpit of play.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the real important sort of subtle takeaways, is that just creating this little sandpit to play with having disagreements over, again, something as innocuous as a piece of artwork can then extend into other parts of our lives.
Yeah.